Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Chris Weidenbar, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Petty Officer Bianca Lustuzzi. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. I now ask all present to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Thank you. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this National Memorial Museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway lands. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Harold Beardmore Kaye. Harold Kaye was born on the 3rd of April 1892, the eldest son of Sophia and Walter Kaye of Brisbane. After Harold attended West End State School, the family moved slightly further west to the suburb of Chelmer. Here, Harold found work as a warehouse assistant, following in the footsteps of his father, who worked as a warehouseman and importer, and was an active member of the local Freemasons' Lodge. Harold Kaye enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in late August 1915 and was allotted to reinforcements to the 15th Battalion. 3/4 of the battalion had been recruited as volunteers from Queensland, with the rest from Tasmania. Kaye joined his unit in late May 1916, having travelled from Australia to the desert training camps of Egypt. It wasn't long before he was on the move again, as his unit and the rest of the 4th Division were transferred to France to join the fighting on the Western Front. Entering the front line in the relatively quiet nursery sector near Armentières, where new troops were first introduced to trench warfare, the battalion undertook its first operation, an unsuccessful raid on the 2nd of July. About a month later, Kaye saw his first major action in Pozières. The Australian 1st Division had captured the fortified village in late July. But with this, Pozières became the focus of the Somme fighting, and the worst place to be on earth. A series of retaliatory artillery bombardments and counterattacks followed, surpassing anything previously endured by the Australians. By the time that the 4th Division, including Kaye's 15th Battalion, was called on to join the line, it had already suffered 1,000 casualties. It too endured a massive artillery bombardment until on the 7th of August, the last German attempt to retake Pozières was defeated. The fighting, however, was far from finished. A few days later, the 4th Division pressed the attack north towards Mouquet Farm. Although the farm buildings themselves had been reduced to rubble, strong stone cellars below ground had been incorporated into the German defences. Determined German counterattacks threw almost every advance back to its start line. Heavy rain turned the shell-torn earth into a quagmire in which the mud penetrated rifle and machine gun mechanisms and even clogged the firing pins of grenades. The Australian official historian, Charles Bean, wrote of the battlefield conditions consisting of flayed land, shell hole bouldering, shell hole, corpses of young men lying against the trench walls or in shell holes, some, except for the dust settling on them, seeming to sleep, others torn in half, others rotting, swollen and discoloured. He famously wrote that Pozières Ridge is more densely sown with Australian sacrifice than any other place on earth. The Australians suffered as many casualties in 6 weeks around Pozières as in the entire 8-month Gallipoli campaign. Of 23,000 Australian casualties, 6,800 men were killed or died of wounds. The British advance eventually bypassed the area, leaving it an isolated outpost until it fell on the 27th of September 1916. Private Kaye would not live to witness this Pyrrhic victory. He was wounded during fighting on the 27th of August. After being seen by a field ambulance with gunshot wounds to his chest and upper extremities, he died from his wounds at a casualty clearing station 4 days later. Harold Kaye was 24 years old. Today his remains lie in Pushveillé British Cemetery near Amiens. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Harold Beardmore Kaye, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow, not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought, in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.